Welcome to Life by Design, episode 371. Welcome to Life by Design. I'm your host, Dr. Jamie Richards, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. Kresser Jug.
As always, happy to be here. Happy to do another one of these.
Yes, always fun. We are creators of Life by Design with many locations worldwide. Each week on the show, we discuss the principles and the practice of Life by Design. Today, we're talking about a logical fallacy. One of them specifically talking about the guilt trip. And Kresser just heard me get a guilt trip from my 5-year-old daughter and made the point that, man, they're good at arguing and they're good at debating. And there is a way to have a conversation with somebody. There's a way to debate and share opinions. Using a guilt trip is one that is really common, but it's one that we wouldn't advise. We're going to talk today about the guilt trip. Lots of places where this happens, guys, probably conversations with family, coworkers, friends. And I think a big part of it is just identifying, when somebody's giving you a guilt trip and why that is actually a bad thing and why you want to try and avoid that. So, Kresser?
Act like it was take it away. So the guilt trip is actually a smaller component to a larger logical fallacy, which is the argument from intimidation. Bear with me while I get all technical. It's when somebody tries to morally condemn you without providing any reasons or any facts, is the argument from intimidation. They're trying to make you feel bad for thinking or feeling a certain way, and they're trying to get you to judge their opinion or society's opinion or somebody else's opinion over your own opinion or over your own ideas without actually providing you any valid reasons for doing so, right? So, we're chiropractors. So the argument from intimidation in chiropractic could sound something like, oh, you're not one of those crazy parents who takes their kid to a chiropractor, are you? Everyone knows there's no reasons for that. Right. And when you actually look at it, there's lots of very good reasons why you should be taking your kids to the chiropractor or why you can take your kids to the chiropractor, but they don't want you to, understand the facts. So anytime the whole point is, and the reason that we're sharing this with you is this is one of the most prevalent arguments available today. Social media is ripe with the argument from intimidation. Your family gatherings and your family who, oftentimes they are well-meaning and well-intentioned. Well, you don't want to be one of those crazy people that joins a CrossFit. People get hurt there all the time. Right.
Oh, yeah,
so, I mean, for sure. It's just, and the whole point is learning how to recognize this and learning to, the point is they still could be right, whether they're sharing a moral condemnation or not, but nobody's right just based on their opinion. They're right based on facts. And right. If they're not supporting it with some evidence, at least some type of evidence, then you can throw the whole argument out altogether.
Well, based on what you're explaining, it seems to me that this would probably be prevalent in a relationship where there's a hierarchy, like a parent to a child or a teacher to a child, one where it's much easier for the intimidation to actually have an effect.
Well, we've all experienced this, right? I mean, anyone that's gone to university, there's always been, a kid in the class who might have a different opinion or ask a question, and the question is outside of the box of what the professor believes and what the professor is trying to convey, which is often met with extreme cynicism from the professor and sneering and laughing by the class, right? Without, I just think of like your sociology, class. This actually happened to me in sociology because I had a question and like it was met by like, well, everyone knows that's disproven, and like everyone laughed, and I'm like, oh, okay. Well, do you want to give me the evidence for how this is disproven? Right? Like right. I'm glad you believe it, but that doesn't make you right. And the fact that you can't provide me with any reasons, is kind of giving me. I didn't understand it at the time, but like it kind of gives you like a funny feeling in your gut.
Right. So what you're talking about here in the show notes, Crescio, ways to bulletproof yourself against this. I'm guessing this is, really the outcome of going through the Think by Design steps, right? Of developing self-esteem, of, being clear on your value systems. So when you recognize that somebody's using a technique like this, or again, a lot of times it's probably not even conscious. It's just something that they've probably been brought into, something that they've seen used against them. And it's just, something that they tend to just pass on, from that type of, experience in their own life. How do you bulletproof yourself against this?
Well, it's actually really, I'm happy that you brought it up. I never thought of it that way. It's precisely against people who have high self-esteem in certain areas of their life that will not buy this argument. Mm-hmm. Right? It's the lack of self-esteem. Because remember, part of self-esteem is believing that you have the abilities to face the challenges of life. Right. And this mentality of somebody who would use or accept this is typically the opposite thing, right? They've chosen to accept somebody else's opinion or somebody else's moral standard as their own moral standard, and now they're condemning you for thinking differently, right? So in essence, they're condemning you for like having self-esteem,
right?
Right? Like it's crazy. So like, if you're falling for this, or if you're recognizing this, I guess the first place really is to start with self-esteem and making sure that you are aware of, your own personal beliefs and why you have those beliefs,
Yeah.
Probably the hardest thing to do in life.
Yeah, no, I think you've kind of highlighted the important piece, which is, starting to dig into what you believe and why you believe it. I know when we teach our Think by Design course in the Think by Design book, which we'll put in the show notes here, guys, you can check it out, lifebydesign.com/podcast, and you can see anything we talk about today in those show notes. I think getting clear on what your value system is, and then starting to ask questions about, why do I believe that? And I know for me, that was probably the, pivotal experience for me, was asking, why do I believe this about health? Or why do I believe this about relationships? Or why do I believe that about money? And, coming up against some of my beliefs, which in retrospect, weren't held against something that was actually true. And so once I started to wade through the belief systems and get to at least what I think at this point is many truths, and I'm sure there's areas right now that I believe that I'll uncover later that it wasn't a truth, and you just kind of continue to go through that process. But I would say I would be more susceptible to this type of manipulation 15 years ago than I will be today, simply because I have a better idea of what is true and what isn't true, especially in areas where I feel confident in, which is also areas where I'm going to be speaking about or interacting with people. So I think it also brings up a point, and maybe you can comment on this. I make sure I'm not talking a lot about things I have no idea about.
Yeah, I was going to approach it actually from a different angle, which is you've learned the process of finding out, which way you're leaning before you start talking about something.
Right.
Like if you hear something, if you hear a lot, and there's a lot of strong opinions available today, there's definitely no shortage of that, right? Like it's not that hard to fact check and to start to realize, who's probably blowing some hot air versus who has based their opinions on something valid and something rational. Right. So like, again, I don't think the point is to have an opinion about everything. It's just not to swallow somebody's opinion and start regurgitating something because, so-and-so said it.
Right. No, I think you see a lot of the arguments and logical fallacies being applied in areas where, if you go to like a conversation out with a bunch of buddies, you realize that most of the stuff that people are spouting off about, they have no idea about. And so you see lots of this back and forth and guilt trips and intimidation. And a lot of it is, it's not meant to be, mean, or it's not done in that way. It's just, when you don't know a lot about something and you're talking about it, it's much easier to be manipulated by that. So I think the take home really in terms of this is, one, recognizing when someone's using a guilt trip. And I think for parents, this is a big one, recognizing when their parents oftentimes are using a guilt trip, or other people, especially with regards to their children. We see this with teaching. I've seen this with teachers myself, where teachers will use, project their belief systems about teaching and how we're, say, raising our kids. And it really is intended to be a guilt trip, but it doesn't really affect me. because I already know that I'm confident and comfortable with, our approach and how we're taking. I think for a lot of parents listening in, if you're feeling that when a teacher says something to you, or when a healthcare provider says something to you, and you're feeling, bad by that, look in and say, all right, am I feeling bad because this person's trying to give me a guilt trip? Or, maybe this is an opportunity to look into this and say, all right, I need to learn more about this area so I can feel confident in the choice that I'm making.
Sure. This is also a gauge. This is a good gauge of self-esteem in certain areas, right? Because we've experienced similar, and it's unfazed. I'm just like, man, I don't know what you're talking about, but you just kind of smile and nod and continue on your day. But I remember back in the past, I would be, if someone says something to you and it really hurts you, like it really brings up, these negative emotions, it's worth taking a look, right? Like, other people's opinions shouldn't bother you. Like people have a ton of opinions. Like, really, you want to be neutral to these things. I mean, it's okay to objectively agree or disagree, but if you're having like a massive emotional response, to somebody just voicing their belief, I would definitely do some introspecting with that topic specifically.
For sure. I think surrounding yourself with people who can have a rational, objective argument is a part of it too. I've said this to Dana, and I've said this numerous times. Like, you can't have an argument you can't have a rational argument with an irrational person. And I think as a rational person, that tends to be where the frustration comes up. And that actually is where more of my emotion probably gets charged up, is when I'm trying to have a rational discussion with somebody and they're totally irrational. It's not that they don't agree with me, and that doesn't bother me. It's that, the irrationality of the conversation just leads to this emotional blow up or emotional charge. So I think that's another key is, don't get super caught up in other people's opinions and what they think about you, but also just know if you're trying to have an actual rational debate or discussion with somebody and they are irrational, then, you probably just walk away, because the chances of any kind of successful outcome there or learning is probably going to be minimal.
Well, I mean, you just look at history. It always leads to violence, right? And violence doesn't necessarily have to be guns and knives. It can just be, verbal violence, like yelling and shouting in a fight.
That's true. Absolutely true. Awesome, guys. Check out the show notes here, lifebydesign.com/podcast. You can download the Think by Design manual. You can also opt in for a free 30-day Think by Design challenge and get some of these tips and strategies from Kresser over a 30-day period. So as always, thank you for joining the drive to 1 million families worldwide living life by design.